Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another installment of Scott's Selections here for Saturday, December 28th. Before we get into today's play of the day, a quick recap of what happened yesterday. We ended up splitting two plays. We ended up going 1-1 as we ended up winning on the Air Force minus 2.5 as they took on Washington State in the Cheez-It Bowl. That game was pretty much what I thought it would be. Air Force ran the ball down Washington State's throat. They ran for more than 370 yards, and Mike Leach once again came up short in a bowl game, and yep, it was pretty easy, honestly. I feel like Air Force should have blown the game open a couple of times. A couple of penalties ended up throwing some drives off the rails, but either or, they were able to hold on, and we ended up picking up a win there. However, we did pick up a loss with USC on the money line at plus 110 in the Holiday Bowl against Iowa. We got USC at plus 110. They closed at minus 120, so we got a great line. They were underdogs. They switched to favorites. And then, unfortunately, their defense and special teams were terrible, and then Slovis ended up getting injured in the middle of the third quarter with the ball with a shot to take the lead, and then he ended up getting injured, and the backup came in, and they completely fell apart. Happens, sometimes injuries can completely just ruin a play. I'm not saying USC would have won anyway, but I definitely think that USC would have been in a very close game to the end if Slovis had stayed healthy for all 60 minutes, but either or, that remains to be seen. Now, there's a lot on today's card to talk about in college football. It's finally time for the college football playoff, and that is definitely just a very exciting thing that's going on right now. You have a couple of games going on as well. You have the Notre Dame and Iowa State game, and then you also have the Penn State-Memphis game. A lot of entertainment there, as Penn State and Memphis have combined for 80-something points with about 9 minutes left to go. So that's been a very fun game, but for the play of the day, it's actually going to be on a matchup between Clemson and Ohio State in the semifinals in the Fiesta Bowl. And for this play, we actually like a player prop here, which is available on FanDuel, and I'll explain my logic for why I like it. The play of the day will be on Justin Fields' rushing yards under 37.5. And that line is available at minus 112 on FanDuel. Now, I know some people might be wondering, you have such a high-profile matchup between Clemson and Ohio State. Why wouldn't you just take a side here? Why do you like a player prop? And the reason why is because of the fact that even though I do think Clemson is going to win this game, and I personally have a sprinkle of Clemson winning the championship in my pocket in the futures market, I just don't really like the way that this line has trended. Everybody seems to be betting Clemson, and this line has already started to climb to 3. It's still a 2.5, so you could take it there if you want to. I think this game could go either way, though. The reason why I like Clemson is just because they have more experience, and I am a little bit concerned with Ohio State's injuries, specifically to Justin Fields, who has been dealing with a knee injury, and he's currently less than 100%, which is exactly why I like the rushing yards in this spot. First of all, 37.5 is a little bit too high just in this spot in general. Justin Fields, when healthy during the entire season, only managed to go over this total. He only went over this total, what was it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. In 13 games, he only went over this total 5 times. And now he even admitted in an interview a couple of days ago that his knee is, quote, only 80 to 85%. He's been wearing a knee brace pretty much for the last couple of weeks. I question just how mobile he'll actually be, and I'm just a bit concerned as to how he's going to reach this total, knowing that his knee and just his running ability in general will be hindered, or should be hindered, by that. Plus, not to even mention the fact that Clemson has a very solid elite defense, and I think they should be able to keep Fields in the pocket and force him into making some decisions. I just don't really like the number here. I think this number should be somewhere in the high 20s, potentially mid-20s. I think 37.5 is just way too high, and I just like the under as a result. If you've looked at the numbers here for Clemson, they're giving up 106.2 rushing yards per game. Ohio State has a ton of solid receivers. Dobbins is also a very solid running back. But Fields, I know he's been a good running back. I don't think he's the fastest guy in the world. He's mostly just based on his physicality. But at the same point, unless he runs the ball 20-something times, I don't really see how he's going to get to 37.5. Clemson should try to contain him in the pocket. They'll try to force him to beat him. And at the same point, Fields with a knee injury is concerning. And it also is worth mentioning that in the NCAA, for some reason, sacks count as rushing yards. So if Clemson ends up sacking Fields for a 5-yard loss, Fields gets -5 rushing yards. Does it make any sense? No, it's completely stupid. But that's what college football does. And if you haven't noticed that, every sack that a quarterback takes counts as rushing yards. And I think if Fields ends up getting sacked, I'd say 2 or 3 times, that should also result in negative, I'd say like 7, 8 rushing yards minimum. So I think that definitely helps the case for betting the under here. Clemson's 22nd in sacks per game with 2.85. Clemson has solid athletes pretty much all over the defense, and I just think that based on the fact that they have the ability to pressure the quarterback, they have the ability and the athletes to keep Fields in check to prevent some long runs on some of these read option plays that Ohio State likes to run, and the fact that Ohio State will probably do whatever they can to keep Fields healthy, I think that they shouldn't call many QB-designed runs. If they do, they won't go for that many yards, as Field is mostly just used as a power back on 3rd and 1, kind of like a slower Cam Newton on one of those like 8 quarterback power type of plays. But as a whole, I expect Fields to look a little bit slower than he normally does. I think he'll try to keep himself upright as much as possible, and I think that he will be a little bit more conservative with trying to protect his knee, and I think you should see him run a little bit less than he is usually accustomed to. So for that reason, the play of the day here on the Fiesta Bowl will be on Justin Fields under 37.5 rushing yards, which is available on FanDuel at -112. Now, I'll give out some leans, though, on the games itself. First game, though, it's kicking off in about half an hour. You have Oklahoma versus LSU. I like the over here, and I also like LSU, minus the 11.5. You have seen some money come back on Oklahoma lately, as LSU is roughly 13.5. Either it's today or just earlier this weekend. Money's coming in Oklahoma a little bit lately, but at the end of the day, I just think LSU is just a much better team. Oklahoma's defense, even though they have looked better at points, I wouldn't say they've fallen apart lately, but they've definitely looked a lot weaker than they did in the start of the season. LSU's defense, on the other hand, has been very sharp, to say the least. They shut down Georgia. Pretty much ever since the Ole Miss game, the defense actually looked really good. I mean, you played Arkansas and a couple of weak opponents, but LSU's defense has looked better. I'm not saying they're going to stop Jalen Hurts. I'm just saying that I think they'll be able to stop him enough to cover this number. I think LSU's probably going to end up scoring 50 in this game. I just think Oklahoma plays at such a fast pace. LSU plays at a fast pace, and I just don't think Oklahoma has the secondary to cover Chase and Jefferson. I just don't think they'll be able to cover him. Plus, Burrow has been absolutely he's been perfect. There's no other way to describe how good he's been other than the fact that he's just been pretty much flawless all season long, which is why he has turned into the Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, 48 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's thrown for over 4,700 yards. I think Oklahoma will be able to, try to pick up the pace, to try to keep up with LSU on offense. But I think if Oklahoma wins this game, they're going to need to score at least, I'd say, probably around 45 to 50. I think LSU is going to do whatever they want offensively. Oklahoma's also dealing with some suspensions, and they're also going to be missing their number one pass rusher in this game, which is a bit concerning. LSU, I just simply think will score at least 45, and I just think Oklahoma, at the end of the day, should score around 30-something. But I think LSU will break 50. I think LSU could win this game somewhere in the realm of like 50 to 34, 50 to 35. So for me, I'll lean to LSU minus the 11.5, and I will lean to the over as well. Other than that, though, Clemson, Ohio State, I already mentioned what I liked in the game for the player prop perspective, and a little bit on what I like for the spread. I like Clemson minus 2.5, and I also like the under 63 here. I just think this total is a bit too high, especially with Fields with his injury, as I said before. I know he's thrown 40 touchdowns and he's only thrown 1 interception, which is absolutely just ridiculous. But at the end of the day, both these defenses are top 5 units in the entire country, and I just think that 63 is a bit too high. I mean, if you have 63, you're expecting one of these teams to get into the 30s. I don't even know if that's going to happen. I think both teams could end up in the high 20s potentially. I think this game should be very close. I mean, if I had to pick the score I think this game will finish at, I think Clemson's going to win 27-24. I think it's going to be very close. I think it'll be a nail-biter throughout. But at the end of the day, I'm going to ride the hotter quarterback and the team that's actually been there before. And I think Ohio State will struggle a bit. I mean, we saw what they did against Wisconsin. And although they looked really good in the second half of that Big Ten title game, I'm a bit concerned with how much Wisconsin dominated them in the trenches in the early going of this game. Not saying that Ohio State's going to fall victim to that once again in this game, but it's a little bit concerning here. I know Clemson, you could argue, didn't really look that sharp defensively against Virginia, but at the end of the day, they ended up forcing some turnovers, and they've still dominated every team they've played over the last, like, I don't know, 2-3 months, give or take, ever since that North Carolina loss. So for me, I think the game will be close, but I'll take Clemson, and I will take the under in that one, as I think this game should end up in the low to mid 50s. Now, talking about some leans on the NBA, I know this video is going to be pretty long, sorry about that, but there's also a lot to cover on today's card. That's something to keep in mind. For the NBA card, just looking at what do we like here, I like the Knicks here, -3. I know that that's a pretty bold statement by me, because it's just, considering the fact that, as everybody knows, I like to fade terrible teams in the NBA, but Washington has been awful as well. And Washington's dealing with some injuries while New York is relatively healthy. Washington might be missing Bradley Beal, who's currently a game-time decision, and it seems like the Wizards are going to err on the side of caution. I don't think he's personally going to play. If he will not be at 100%. Hachimura's still out. Bertans is still out. Wagner's a game-time decision, but he hasn't played in like a week, so you have to wonder how many minutes he will get. But Washington at the power forward spot, I mean, Washington's starting lineup is projecting to look like Isaiah Thomas, potentially Bradley Beal, might not be Bradley Beal. Then you got Bonga at the small forward. You got Admiral Schofield, the Tennessee rookie, at the power forward, who didn't even score in his last game. And then you got Jan Mahinmi, who's somehow still in the league. I don't really know how that works. New York is coming into this game off a solid performance against Brooklyn. I think New York will try to get revenge after losing to Washington about a week ago. And I just think New York's been playing better basketball lately, so lean to the Knicks -3 there. Other than that, looking at the rest of the card here, I would lean to the Lakers, but I'm a bit concerned because I don't know if LeBron's actually going to play. He's currently being listed as questionable. Anthony Davis is currently likely to play, according to reports. I'll lean to the Lakers here. People are overblowing the fact that the Lakers are in the middle of a losing streak. Yes, they've lost their last, I believe it's 4 games in a row, but at the same point, if you've actually looked at the circumstances in which they've lost, it really just hasn't been that bad. And everyone makes it sound like, the sky's falling, just falling on their head. That's just not what's going on. Lakers have lost 4 straight. They lost to the Pacers in a game that Anthony Davis didn't play in. They lost to the Bucks. Bucks are just a very solid team. That's nothing really, to get upset about. Then they lost to Denver by 24 in a game in which LeBron didn't play. And then you lost to the Clippers in a game you were up by 15 points and lost on Christmas. Now, of course, losing to Milwaukee and the Clippers at full strength isn't great. But, I mean, those are 2 of the top 3 teams in the league, in my opinion. So I'm not really going to get that uptight about it. Now, losing to Denver isn't great. Denver's still a very solid team, and LeBron didn't play. And the Pacers, Anthony Davis didn't play. So, I mean, now that if you have LeBron and Anthony Davis back, and you're going up against a Portland team that's lost 2 straight, that's also 4 games under, I'll lean to the Lakers here. I think people need to relax. I think people know that if LeBron and Anthony Davis are healthy, they should be able to beat Portland once again, especially after being able to defeat Portland earlier this season by 23 points. Actually, that was on the road. They already beat Portland on the road by 23 points with both of them playing. So if LeBron and AD are able to go, I would lean to the -5. Other than that, though, not really much else, in my opinion, to talk about with the NBA. Yeah, that's pretty much what I think about basketball. Other than that, college basketball, I looked briefly at the card, didn't really like anything. Most of the good games, I'd say, were occurring in the middle of the afternoon, mostly between Kentucky and Louisville, but that's going to be taking place in about 10 minutes, so I'm not going to bother with that. Not many ranked matchups past 7 o'clock, and I'm not really going to talk about that. So once again, the play of the day for Saturday, December 28th, will be on Justin Fields under 37.5 rushing yards, which is available at -112 on FanDuel. Other than that, though, that's going to be this installment of Scott Selections here for Saturday, December 28th. Good luck to all of you and your respective bets today. Bye, everyone.